Okay, so now we have our colleague Mika Saarinen from the Finnish National Agency, and we are very honored to have his expertise today here. So we hope you will enjoy it and learn a lot, like I learn every time I talk to him.
Thank you very much, and it's really an honor to be here. It's my first time in Serbia, and I'm very glad to be here. So thank you for the invitation. It's really exciting, and I'm also looking forward actually to have a look around the city, of course, because it has such a history and such a name. So that's what I'm looking forward to as well. I arrived last night at 1:30 or 2 o'clock. So if I'm a little bit tired, I apologize for that, but I don't feel that actually, and I understood that most of you were out as well until 2 o'clock. So maybe, you know, it connects us, and this is good to know. But thank you very much to the Serbian National Agency for the invitation. I've been involved in the EU program since about 1997-98, and I started by doing actually surveys of impact of the programs, because they had been running then the Leonardo program in the vet sector, started in 1995, and Finland decided to do some impact studies at that point, and that was how I came into the programs. But then I also worked on higher education in between, and on e-learning, and on a lot of other, which we call digitalization, I guess, of learning nowadays. But back then we called it e-learning, and on a lot of other topics in between. And then I've been in charge of the vet part of the programs for many years now, and been involved in doing surveys and guides and a lot of training events and so forth. So broad experience, and a lot of views that I hope I can share some of them with you today. And this is also maybe why I'm planning to challenge you a little bit. I'm also planning to take you away a little bit from the project thinking. I know you've been planning and talking about project plans and project ideas now, but from our point of view, it's important to think a little bit bigger every once in a while as well, and ask yourself, why are we doing this project, or what is this project linked to, and what is the bigger reasons for doing this project. It's not a project for itself, it's not international cooperation or mobility for itself. It also is important to know what the bigger connection is, and what is the bigger goal that we have a few years ahead, not just right now and right with this project. And one of the worst reasons to apply for projects is to try to get funding. It sounds crazy, because that's what projects are, it's funding, but it's one of the absolute worst reasons to go into a project, to try to get some extra funding. It usually doesn't go very well, because actually the money is still not that big. There's a lot more work than money. It often teaches you a lot, it challenges you, it puts you in very difficult situations, but in the end you don't end up richer, or you don't end up with, more a better balance in your books, in your organizations. So money and yes, you get money through projects, but it's the worst reason to go into projects, and this is what I'm a little bit going to talk about. So the bigger, I'm going to challenge you a little bit to think about the world. This is why I have the world map here as well, and the situation in the world, the situation in the world of work, the situation in Europe, and maybe a little bit challenge you to think about also the real reasons why we're doing this. What are the values behind the Erasmus Plus program? What are the values that Europe tries to promote with this? And what is the type of thinking that we try to create in the young people of Europe with a program like this? And why is that important? It's not just important because European leaders say so, or because we somehow believe in this. It's actually important because of the way the world is developing at the moment, and the way the world of work is developing. And this I'm going to try to to argue for you at least, and I hope you will argue back. If you have a lot of opinions that challenge me, that's even better, because then I can also learn from you. So that's where I'm leaving out of. And that's why I wanted to start with this. It's a little bit far away now. I'm not sure you can see all of this, but I'll read some of the most important points. So I start off with this idea of change, because all of you are really here to promote change in your own organizations, or in your own countries maybe even, or in Europe. And it's often like this with change. When you ask the question, who wants change, there's a huge crowd saying, oh, no, we need change. Yes, I need change now. Change. So, who wants to change themselves? The same crowd is still there, but not so many are putting up their hands anymore. It's a little bit sort of, maybe he could. He is really problematic. He's the one that really needs to change. I'm okay. I can stay like this. And then, which is the question you're asking, because you're trying to promote a project, who wants to lead the change? Often, you talk to an empty room. I hope this is not the situation in your institutions with your colleagues, but unfortunately, my experience is that this is quite often how it is. You might be the ones who wants to ask the question, and you might be the ones who try to sell the idea to your colleagues, but not so many are answering. And not so many are coming to the meetings, and not so many are really eager to go ahead with the ideas that you have. And that's why you need to have good arguments. You need to have good arguments in your own institution towards your management, rector, principal. I call it management because we have very different institutions, but if you're a school, it's more a rector maybe. If you're more a private organization, it's more the management. You need to have very good arguments towards them, and money is not the argument only. You need to have other arguments while you're doing this work. You need to have good arguments towards your colleagues, the ones who should be here, putting their hand up to, participate in your project. And you need to have good arguments, of course, towards the funding organization, so the Erasmus Plus agency or whatever it is in your country. And you need to have very good arguments towards industry. We had some good discussions here on the tables about how to get the industry or the workplaces involved. This is not an easy topic. You need to have very good arguments. And the arguments are not the same, maybe, towards all of them. But they need to have a connection, of course. They need to have the bigger picture. So this is what we leave from. So one of the arguments, and again now, I'm sorry about this, you can really not see this, but the point isn't to read the actual details on this either. This is actually a graph from a study by the European Union on globalization. And it gives a very long-term perspective of how globalization has developed. It actually starts with 1914 to 2015. So it's a study called... I actually didn't write up the study here, but it's called something like the Challenge of Globalization or something like this by the European Commission. You can find it online. And why I brought it here is because this is one of the reasons why we're doing this work, I feel. There's a long tradition, and we forget this, of international cooperation and globalization. It's not something that has started to happen in the last few years. It might feel like that sometimes for us because history has had its own periods. But in fact, there are many, many steps that have slowly and slowly taken us towards a much more interconnected world. So that really things that are affecting sectors here in Serbia, for example, or in Finland, are not dependent on our country's economies or our country's circumstances. They are dependent on global issues. The obvious examples, there's of course tourism trade or any other sort of naturally international trade, but it affects things like farming even. You think of farming and a farmer as one of the maybe most national things. They're tied to the ground, to the earth, to the local situation in their own countries. And that's what they do. They farm that land, and this is a very national thing. It has no international connections. This is not true at all. They're quite dependent on international research for fighting fighting diseases in the plants and getting the materials. Actually, the trade of seeds for farming is an international trade today. You need to buy it on international global markets. You need to follow the prices on a global level. You sell your products on a global market, not only on a local market, especially if you're a bigger farmer. And the prices vary day to day. It's sort of like stock trading. So in fact, farming, which you might think is one of the most national jobs there is also global. And it actually goes for most other trades as well. And we haven't quite realized two things about this, that this trend is so long and it's slowly growing into a much more global world. In the same study, the European Commission lines up a few numbers. So, for example, 1.2 billion international trips were made in 2016 in the world. 1.2 billion. This is every seventh person in the world. Every eighth, seventh person in the world would have traveled around the world. This is unprecedented. We are very globally connected. 244 million people are living outside their home country globally. Huge number of people. 914 million people are social network users. So they use things like Facebook or WhatsApp or to keep in contact also across borders very often. And they have at least one foreign friend in their network. 75 million people are doing online cross-border purchasing. So meaning they buy products from other countries on Amazon or anything else. I'm sure many of you do too. This is every day today. Globalization, internationalization, it's here. We're all doing it. Young people are playing online games with friends from Hong Kong and the United States and Argentina all at the same time. So they're already living this very thing every day. So the reason for doing international cooperation cannot be that to become international as such, I think. It's really just to catch up with this trend and to get somehow involved with it in a meaningful way so that we can really utilize the globalization that is already taking place. And this is what these projects and the work we do in Erasmus Plus is a lot about. Another aspect to this is, of course, globalization and economy is often linked. And the fact is that there are trends in the world today that are also worrying around this. Globalization is a very positive thing. It has actually, by all studies, it has improved living standards in countries. It has improved living standards in Europe. The opening of the European market it's basically all positive when you look at the numbers of it. But there are, of course, threats as well, and we all know that. And this is also why we have anti-movements in Europe going up. And one of the threats, for example, is that we're very dependent on things like the Chinese economy and the development of it. And it hasn't been all positive. Quite recently, the Chinese economy has actually taken a downturn and it's fighting along. And this might have huge effects on us today. So we're not just dependent on our own economies, but we're also dependent on other countries' economies very heavily. And this is, of course, especially for the European countries that are heavily focused on export. Like Finland, for example, is a country like that, and many others. Then it's a good thing, yes, but there's also threats. There's other threats to do with international cooperation and globalization. This is a raft of refugees. We all know that this is a big issue that we need to deal with in Europe. So we need to also make our young people ready to think about these issues and have a stand on these issues and take a positive stand, because there are also opportunities, of course. There's a lot of unrest in Europe as well. It's not all easy peasy going. It's recently some positive trends again in France or in Holland, for example. There's been some positive trends with international cooperation or globalization, but many of the issues also have to do with the questions asked around the refugees or the more right-wing movements that are lifting their head up in many of our European countries, nearly all, in fact. And so it's a real sort of a balance like this at the moment. And of course, a program like Erasmus Plus or the work we do, we want to be on the side of trying to fight these trends and to bring in the arguments for why a more open-minded, why a more European look on the world is the way to go. And I think that's the only approach. And one of the biggest reasons for this is the way the world of work is changing. There are certain trends at the moment in technology, but also in society and in the world at large that really pinpoint to the fact that we cannot develop anymore our trades or our sectors or our training for them or our school systems in a national way. We need this kind of cooperation between countries because these trades, these sectors, these jobs are more and more international and globally dependent. For example, just the use of internet technology. This is a picture of 3 children in the 70s that are playing down by the river together, and this is a picture of 3 children now, maybe like a year ago, playing together, but on their mobile phones. They could just as well be playing with their friends in another country, like I was saying. Very connected kids that are growing up today. They are totally aware of developments in the world in a very different way than we were when we were growing up. And they at least have all that knowledge available to them. Our job is, of course, to show them that it's also an opportunity and that they should be utilizing it in some reasonable way. But that's a whole different story. That's another issue. The other thing is that the jobs are themselves becoming, to some degree, maybe virtual. On the right here, there's a picture of a lady at home. I'm not calling her the plumber, but she's doing the plumber's job. She is in fact in contact to a plumber over an online environment, and the plumber is telling her what to do to fix her plumbing, her sink. Is this the future of plumbing? Maybe. Is this the future of many of our other trades? Do we start to build our own houses this way? That the builder sits at home in his couch and he tells us, what to do. What to do. Maybe, maybe not. I think we're still somewhere in between. Maybe we will always be somewhere in between. But this is certainly the direction it's moving into. That more of the social media and more of these sort of connected realities and virtual realities. There's a fancy word in English too called augmented reality, when you add another reality onto this reality through these IT tools, and then you can see both at the same time. Basically, the best example of it is the Pokemon Go game, right? Where you can see the reality around you, you can also see the Pokemon Go reality, and they are layered on top of each other. This is a bit like that. These here again is in Japan. This is from the social and healthcare sector. They are robots in a way that help these people with difficulties to use their legs to walk, and they're attached to them. So they are, in a way, support structures. In a way, I don't know. I don't have the terminology. I'm not a social and healthcare person myself. But in a way, they're helping them in moving about and increasing their mobility. So technology is changing our world in many, many ways, but it's not just changing the way we use technology, but it's changing the way we interact with people and the way we connect with people. But we also, of course, at the same time have a change happening in the way the nature and the balance of ecology in the nature is developing, and it's very threatening at the moment. And all of these issues are actually the technological developments or the ecological developments are both threats and opportunities. And this is one of these issues that I think are at the core of what we do as well. We need to open up this thinking to our young people that they don't see changes in the world as threats only, but as opportunities as well. Because the fact is that the ecological destruction in certain areas of the world, or the lack of water, or the heating up, it's also an opportunity, just as well. So it's an opportunity for new business, it's an opportunity for new cooperation, and that's the same with many of these other developments in the world at the moment. For example, the way a simple app that you develop for your mobile phone today can spread. I can develop it in Finland, but the usage is not necessarily in Finland. The usage can start somewhere like in Argentina, and then that's where the biggest usage comes, and then it spreads around the world. And at the same time, there can be kids in the United States and in Australia and in Finland taking that app into use today, when I launch it and start selling it. This is unprecedented. We've never had a product like this before. It's a totally new field of opportunities. It's also a threat in a way, as we know. So it's a real. It can also destroy businesses in another area. But we need to bring up our young people to realize the opportunities that are built into this, of course. And this is one of the roles of the future of VET, I think, and one of the things we should be doing as well. And there are skills needed in this area then. There are other skills. It's not just the vocational skills, or not just the skills to be able to take care of a sick person, or the skills to be able to build a house, or the skills to be able to fix a plumbing or change the oils in a car. People that are today growing up into professions also need to have skills to keep on learning. They need to have skills to cooperate in international teams. Some of their colleagues might actually be in the BMW factory in Germany, helping them to fix that car engine in Serbia. And they need to be able to understand also these opportunities that are involved if they are going to build their own business, for example. So they need to have a broader understanding of the world around them. That's where the opportunities come from. And so that's another opportunity that the program provides. It provides these insights into the bigger picture of the world, what is out there. And it's one of the strengths, I think, of the mobility action, for example, in the Erasmus Plus program, that it really opens up the young people's minds and hearts, makes them see the world in a different way, makes them see opportunities where they were not maybe seeing them before. And it's one of the key issues that we need to also take into account when we plan our project. I'm going to skip that because it's basically the same argument. So this was the challenge part here, and I'm taking you away from the project world. I'm not a little bit into a different universe maybe, and maybe some of the ideas feel a bit far away for you, but I hope they at least open up your thinking a little bit as well to see why we're doing this work. And this is what we've been doing for a long time then in Finland. And I was thinking I would share some of the thinking from Finland with you. Because I think it can be useful for you in your own organizations, maybe in your own countries. How have we been thinking about this topic of internationalization or cooperation across borders, whatever we want to call it? Because it's been a topic in Finnish vocational education and training for a very long time, actually. We can find strategic documents from 89, 90 already, long before the EU programs, saying that we need to develop in this direction. In a way, these documents have been a little bit with the thinking that the VET field needs to develop in the direction of the higher education field. So the higher education field has gone in the forefront of internationalization, but the VET field needs to come as well. The reason being that both higher education and VET graduates go into the world of work. This is not the same for primary education, and this is not the same for general upper secondary education. There you continue with your studies, but most students from the VET programs go into the world of work, so they need to have this experience with them. And actually the push for this in Finland started with our export-driven industry that saw that the young people that were coming into their workplaces were good in vocational skills, they could really do their job, and that was fine, but they were not so good in cooperating in international teams, or they were not so good at thinking outside the box and thinking about those, doing things in a different way. They were good at doing their job exactly the way they had been taught and told in education. But the workplaces needed people that also did all these other things. So they needed people with more skills. And this was one of the pushes towards that, to bring into VET qualifications more of this international dimension. And we've been building on that. It's in the national qualification requirements. Mobility has been a big push in Finland. It's not only Europe at all. There's global cooperation as well all around the world. And it's really been one of the sort of strategic goals of Finnish education. So skills needs for the labor market and the individuals has been the push. And in a way also, of course, it's connected to the development of vocational education and training, the quality of vocational education and training, and even the attractiveness, which is a big topic in many European countries, that not enough young people are applying for VET programs. They like to go the general education route rather. And this is a problem for many industries, that they don't get enough workers with enough skills. So one way of making the VET programs more attractive, at least for Finland, has certainly been the opportunity to also take part in international projects as a part of your study, or mobility periods as a part of your study. This is something that's very interesting to young people. They like to go to programs where they can do this. So it's also one aspect of why it has been so successful. So the development has been very high. We actually have every 8th student today that starts in VET has a chance during their 3-year program to go. So every 8th, that's 13-14%. It's much higher than the European average, which is actually something like 2%, according to some studies. There are not very good studies, but so this is very high. We have much less coming to Finland, so whoever wants to send to Finland, please do, and please be in contact with us. It's much lower number, it's about a third of it, but it's probably a little bit higher, in fact, because the ones going directly to companies, we cannot get into the statistics. And this is not Erasmus Plus only, so this is all kinds of mobility. But Erasmus Plus is about half of this. It's, as I said, all over the world, mainly to Europe. About 95%, it differs a little bit from year to year, is within Europe, but also to Asia, Africa, Latin America, North America, and even a few to Australia. So it's really all over the world. Asia is maybe the one that's growing the most, because a lot of Finnish business is also, of course, present, like for all countries in Asia. And of course, Erasmus Plus is big in Europe, but in other things we also have other funding, and institutions also fund themselves mobility, which is very important from our point of view. But it's not just about the business, and this is where I really want to underline this. We've done quite a bit of work on this, and yes, it's about business skills, and it's about what businesses need, and the broader skills that today's world of work needs. But one of maybe the most sort of important work for us from recent years has been a study called Hidden Competencies, where we really tried to open up the concept of what are international skills. We did it with business in mind as well, but we did it with the broader societal point of view in mind as well. And if you think of traditional thinking of international skills, it's things like language skills, tolerance, cultural knowledge, these sort of things. And certainly you learn them in international cooperation. But actually through this study we found that there are other areas which are developed equally as much, such as for example, resilience, which means that you can push on, even if it's a little bit hard. This is something that is really developed during your mobility periods, for example, and periods abroad. The skill to not be defeated right away and think, oh, this is difficult, I'm just going to give up. And this is very important skill, both in life and in work. Another skill that is really important is, of course, productivity and the possibility to really, produce and target the actual goals that you have. And then maybe most importantly, curiosity towards what is new. And you can find more information about this in the study. It's quite interesting, actually, and it's really closely linked to the work you do with students and teachers, both in mobility but also in strategic partnerships. And you can find a lot of arguments from the study as well for why we should be doing this work. And it's actually also a study that has affected very many global companies and their recruitment policies. So they have started to look for international skills or international competencies as one of the key competencies to find also people that are curious, productive and resilient. Not just the ones who know language or who know different cultures, but the ones who can maybe be very productive in part of their work. So it's also changed the way business thinks a bit, this study. And that's quite interesting. So we've done a lot of work around this internationalization. We have done some surveys, and we've developed some guides, and all of this is available online. So you can find this material online, and you can go back to it later, and you will be sent this link to the presentation as well. Maybe one of the most sort of influential things is this model that has also been a part of the European documents for applying for the charters. I think you heard about the charters yesterday and the long-term mobility funding schemes, and it's a part of that. And the idea and the thinking has been here that it's good to do projects. It's a good way to start. You need to find contacts, you need to find partners, but in the long run, if you want to do really influential work around internationalization, you need to bring it into your organization's main functions and main strategies. You might not have a strategy in your organization as such right now, but most organizations are one way or another developing them anyways over the coming years, I would think, and then having internationalization being built in there is very important. And this guide helps you to take that into account. So what is it linked to in your organization? It's not just projects on its own, it's also linked to things like the teachers' development, the skills of the teachers and the development of the teachers' skills. It's linked to things like the quality of education and benchmarking your own systems maybe towards other systems. It's linked to of course, the students and their needs. It's linked to the qualifications and the development of the qualifications, the contents of the qualifications. Very often in strategic partnerships, for example, you develop the contents of your qualifications. It's linked to the pedagogical methods and the work around pedagogics that you do in your institutions. So it has a lot of links. Internationalization or international projects or EU projects are not something on the side of everything else. It's in the everyday of most of the activities of your institutions. And this is what the work that we've done around the strategic internationalization, I think, really highlights. So, and it can be very useful to start a discussion in your own institutions about this. Once you get, you need to first have a few partners, you need to first have a few contacts. But then when you get past that, because it's also important, and we've noticed this in countries where maybe the development has gone further, it's really important to also have people that can do this work on a long-term basis. It's one of the key issues. And normally the way you get people is through resources and money, and strategy is a pathway into that discussion. So this is also why it's important. But if you want to do long-term cooperation, I mean, we know this from countries like the Netherlands or Finland or Sweden. I think you really need to have some time for this and some resources and some people that are dedicated to this work. Just a few more words about strategy, and now we come back to the change. Because really, strategy and doing this work around projects, it is about change, like I said. And actually I like to show you this, because change is complex and you need to do change in the right way. And I like this chart very much, and I like us to stop a little bit around it. I wonder if I have time still. I'm not sure. Yeah, it's okay. Because there's a few things that need to be in place when you try to implement change. It's not so simple as to just apply for a project and run the project through, use up the money, and then think that the change has taken place. So if you really want to make a difference, for example, one of the projects in the back we're talking about, really upskilling the teachers in the use of IT tools around work-based learning and maybe helping guiding the students with IT tools. If you want to make that change happen, if you want the teachers to be more skilled in this area, experience says and studies say that it's not enough to just start the project. You need to have the vision, which is often the project idea, the idea of where you want to go. You need to have that view, yes, but you also need to make sure you have the skills in place. You also need to have the incentives or the reasons for doing it. You need to have the resources, like I was just saying, and you need to have an actual action plan. And if one of these are missing, and this is where I like this so much, it leads to all different kinds of confusions or frustrations or so forth. So for example, I'm just taking a few examples here. If you have everything else, you have you more make your project plan, for example, as an action plan. You have the resources, you get your project approved, you have the incentives, you have the reasons to do it, and you have the skills, but you lack that big vision. You don't really know why you have this project. It often leads to confusion. The project is carried through, yes, but everybody is a little bit, why did we do all of this? This was a lot of work. What really happened here? Everybody is a bit confused because you don't know why you've been doing that work. The vision is important. You need to have the big reason for doing your work. But equally, if you don't have, for example, the resources in place, you have the idea of cooperation, but you don't get your project approved and you still try to go ahead with it, it leads to frustration because you can't get anywhere. Or you draw up a very good vision, you have a very big, you really know why you're doing this and you get the project approved and so forth, but in the end, you don't have a very clear action plan. It often leads to something called false starts. So it sort of starts many times. Every time you meet with the project partners, it feels like a new start. And yes, things feel so good now, but then nothing happens. Because nobody has really planned out what all the steps are that you need to take to get to your goal and your vision, and so forth. So I like this. This reminds every project manager and every international person in different organizations that you need to have all the pieces in place, and it's about a balance between all the pieces, and you shouldn't focus too much on one or the other. And so it's very practical in a way, very pragmatic, but it also touches on this issue of why also strategic thinking and the bigger picture is important, which is actually what the European projects are asking for as well. So we've done some studies as well in Finland. This is an interesting study that we've translated into English on how the strategies have affected Finnish vocational education institutions and what issues have been most important. Some of the issues that I've mentioned now are also mentioned in this study, and there are also some other small golden nuggets there that you can maybe make use of in thinking about how to plan your own activities. But all in all, the situation is quite good. We actually have in this study also an overview of what kind of topics are most institutions working on when it comes to internationalization. And as you can see, mobility is one of the topics that are mentioned absolutely the most. But also the development of the quality of education, internationalization at home. Does anybody know here what that means? What could internationalization at home be? Yeah. For example, courses it could be vocational courses in foreign language, but it could also be language courses, but it can also be incoming students that are you using as a part of your program. It can be incoming teachers. You can do that in Erasmus Plus now, right? In mobility, you can also invite teachers to come to your own or not teachers, but company representatives to come to teach in your school or in your own institution. So that's, for example, internationalization at home, yeah. But it's also using international materials from YouTube or, anything. I mean, it can be a very broad thing. And it means that internationalization is not just something for the ones who go on a mobility period. And then also, it's a lot about staff development. It's about equality for many Finnish organizations, because we have such high mobility numbers already. A big discussion topic recently in Finland has been over the past maybe 5 years. How can we be equal in giving mobility opportunities? I know one of the groups in the back was also talking about this. How can they choose the ones who go in an equal way so that some students are not feel left out, or the reasons are good, and we cannot, of course, provide a mobility opportunity for everyone. That's not what equality is about. But equality is about treating everyone in a way that they at least feel that they have been taken into account, and giving different opportunities to different students, but in a way equally different kinds, and so forth. But it's nice to have a look at the study maybe for you as well, because you can see that there are how broadly linked the topic of internationalization can be in different institutions. I won't go into that actually now. I'll just finish by saying that when you plan your projects, please keep the bigger vision in mind. It is really, really important to link the work you're doing to both your own institution's development, so it's not something on the side of the normal development that you do in your institution. It should be linked to that, and linked to things that happen nationally in your countries, developments that are taking place anyways, important topics for your country right now. Please make those topics also project topics. These are the strongest proposals if you can do this link. But then also the European developments and the world developments. So don't go too much into the details, but again, remember also the balance between the different areas. You need a good action plan, and you need the resources, and you need the skills as well to carry out your project. So the balance at the same time as the big vision. It's not an easy topic you have when to plan the projects for Erasmus Plus. It's one of the most difficult tasks, but we can also see that the ones who are really well planned can actually have a huge impact on the institutions. It doesn't just bring you international contacts or give your students opportunities to go abroad. It can also really push development, for example, around work-based learning or any of the topics, ICT use or so forth that you were talking about here. So it's a real opportunity as well. Hope I've given you something to think about, and I'm really looking forward to some debate as well. So if anyone wants to ask a question or challenge me in any way, I'm quite open to that. If we have time, I'm looking at the organizers. No? Not really, no. But let's take a few minutes anyways. But thank you very much. Okay.